Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Gnomebot Studios. I'm back with another video, but this time it's not going to be about Grit Fantasy RPG. Today's topic will be about what's new and upcoming for Gnomebot Studios. Now, I have been quietly working on this book project for quite a while now, and I finally feel like I'm in a spot where I can make a video about it, so it's pretty exciting. I have been developing a sci-fi version of Grit RPG, and that book is going to be called Grit Galaxies. Now, this is not a new topic for me or a new setting. This sci-fi setting basically dates back before Grit Fantasy was put out. I actually ran a Warp Shell, ICRPG Warp Shell game, which is the sci-fi setting for ICRPG, for 2.5-3 years, which is about 30 sessions or so. And it was episode based, and it was really cool. What I did though is I took the core rules of the book. It started in 2E, and then I later kind of moved into Master Edition. But I developed my own life forms, my own equipment, my own types, that kind of stuff. And I had a lot of cool notes that I could draw from for this grit stuff, because it easily transfers over. So I had kind of a good base and understanding of what I wanted to do, even before I was heavily working on Grit Fantasy RPG. So, and I feel like where I love fantasy, I've been playing it for like 40 plus years. So it's just a real breath of fresh air to be working on science fiction based RPG at this point. So this is exciting to me. I'm really kind of enjoying the process. And so I'm looking at Grit Galaxies and Grit Fantasy as being kind of the two pillars that I'm going to kind of grow from with Grit RPG. So I wanted to kind of go through some of the basics of what the book is going to offer. Of course, these things may be subject to change as I work on them, but I am using the template from Grit Fantasy RPG as far as the layout and graphic design is concerned, to kind of plugging that into the Grit Galaxies. So it's making my work a lot easier. Plus, I've learned from my mistakes working through the first book, so I know a little bit more this time around. So I'm just going to go through kind of in the order of the book and just talk through some points on it, just to get you familiar with what I'm putting out for this book. I have already started testing. I've got like 5 sessions tested already. I've got a 6th one coming up. And I'm just going to continue running these sessions until I feel I'm in a good spot with it. But I do feel like I'm going to require a lot less testing because the core structure is basically already set up. So I am just testing thematic elements, gear, and lineage abilities, that kind of stuff. And I do have to say, if you have not looked at Grit Fantasy RPG, I do have it on Drive-Thru RPG, available on PDF, short softcover, and hardcover, just to get you folks out there who are not familiar with it to get your eyes on it. I also have a whole bunch of videos on it. So anyway, I'm going to move ahead here. I've got a little thing set up. We're going to work through some points here. So the first part of this thing, this Grit Galaxies, that I want to make known is that it is going to be 100% compatible with Grit Fantasy RPG. Okay, so you're going to be able to take all the gear from both books and just mash them together the way you want them. You are also going to be able to take the lineages, and they're going to be able to move back and forth between the two settings. So this is just going to astronomically increase the amount of options for you for your games if you want to do that. I also want to say that the Grit Galaxies is going to be standalone, so you don't have to buy Grit Fantasy to play Grit Galaxies. It's going to include all the necessary rules and everything to run sci-fi Grit. Okay. Nothing is going to be missing. And I do have to say that the page count is going to be identical. I've already locked that in. It's going to be 138 pages. There's going to be a ton of illustrations. All of them are going to be full color, which is kind of going away from Grit Fantasy, which is just grayscale, which is what I really wanted to do for that. But what I want to do for Galaxies is just full color everything. And they're going to look very much like these little guys that you see on this page. They're going to be a little bit more cartoony and more simplistic, but that is the style that I'm kind of moving in at the moment. And this makes me happy, so I'm moving in the direction of happiness. All right. So the core rules, I have to say, the core rules are going to be nearly identical. There's going to be a few tweaks and rewording things that happen in the core rules, and that is just to keep things either more streamlined or to eliminate some confusion points that people may have had with Grit Fantasy. There are not many, but I'm just making small adjustments, learning from Grit Fantasy on the core rules. And again, I think they're going to be like 14 pages. All the examples are going to be different and set to the theme of the book. There's going to be a whole new sets of advice as well. So you're not going to have a complete clone from one to the other book, or fantasy to this book. There will be things to read through on this. So I am very excited to have the core rules basically identical, which makes testing so much easier and which makes the games absolutely compatible with each other. There are only going to be a couple things that I'm going to add, and that will be relating to maybe a couple things in combat potentialities or relating to equipment, like sci-fi versus fantasy. These are going to be very small things. Okay. All right, moving into characters. You are going to expect 12 new lineages. They are already written out, and all the abilities are done for them. I have everything situated as far as what they're going to even look like. So that part is done. There's a few abilities that I'm testing at this point, but one good thing about developing Grit Fantasy ahead of time is I have a good eye for balance now for the rules. So these abilities this time around are not as difficult to kind of work out. There are going to be 20 new unique items that come around or come with the characters as a choice for a unique item. There's going to be 40 new basic gear items, all sci-fi, of course. The armor is going to be a little bit better, less prowess penalty on stuff. So I'm trying to reflect what a sci-fi setting would do for gear. Okay, they're a little bit stronger, but not a lot. And in the details section, you're going to have brand new quirks and features, and I've added another table that you can roll on for your origin of how you arrived upon the ship. Now, I'm gonna stress in the book that Grit Galaxies is going to run very well with an episode-based setting where you use a main ship called a Galaxian cruiser that all the characters are like crew members aboard. They don't control the ship, but they basically are sent on missions from the ship. Okay, so that's just your home base that you go back to every time. So you can run one-shots out of this over and over and over and over again. You could do episode-based games. You could do campaigns through this. It's just a really nice setup for sci-fi. Okay, so you have that detail that's going to give you that sort of origin of how you got there. And there's a lot of fun ones on that. Okay, moving on to the GM's Guide. So there's going to be a whole new setup of advice in there. There's going to be a lot of things in kind of the core of the GM section that are very similar. I'm not going to change a lot, but I am adding vehicles, and I want to stress, I am not creating a combat vehicle simulator for Grit Fantasy. I do not feel that I want to get into wargaming with ships. So I am currently working out some rules to make it a simple, streamlined kind of way to deal with vehicles in games. I don't want vehicles to be the main attraction, but I need to cover my bases and make sure that there are rules in place for those things. And I have looked at other rule systems, and I have played other games where ships are kind of treated as this sort of community thing where, everybody's aboard, each one gets a role that they get to do. And I don't know if I really like that model. I feel that forces people into roles that they just repeatedly do round after round after round. So I am looking at something a little bit more streamlined and maybe a little more teamwork oriented. So my challenge is to make sure that it works kind of the same or similarly between what players can do and what the GM can do for vehicles. So I will hammer it out eventually, but just let you know that will be in the book. You're going to have a whole new set of optional rules in there because I'm going to add 2 pages more. So we're going to have 4 pages total of optional rules. Some of that will be talking about episode-based games and how to deal with milestones and stuff for that. Builders will be all brand new, and I'm actually developing more for that. So I'm stretching some things out with the builders. I'm adding 2 more. So one is a planet builder, and the other is a ship builder. So you're going to have that option as well. And then in the fantasy book, I had 2 miscellaneous tables right after the builders. I think they were magic effects and traps. But this time I'm putting in some more narrative stuff. So it's going to be legendary places and notable NPCs. So you're going to have 2 D20 tables dealing with those things. And that will help the GM for prepping even more. So just even more tools to work with on the GM side of things. And that's pretty exciting to me because there's some fun stuff in there. Yeah, already talked about all these things: vehicles, optional rules, builders. Okay, moving into the monsters. They're going to be a little bit different than Grit Fantasy. You're going to see a little bit... Hold on, I'm going to have a coffee here. You're going to see a little bit of a change. Now, there are going to be 6 new humanoid monsters, which are going to take the lineages that the characters or the players can choose for their characters and put them into 6 new humanoid monster types. Okay. They will all have their own features and stats. So that's new. You're going to have, this is the big one, you're going to have 12 new, what I'm calling scum monsters. And what that is a group of monsters that are basically villains that are just spread across galaxies that are just continual bad guys, which to me feels thematically correct. If you look at all the movies and books and stuff with sci-fi, there's always these bad guy races that are causing trouble all the time and they just never go away. So I've got 12 of those developed, and the cool thing about that is in the optional rules, I'm going to give a setup for GMs to run scum-based campaigns. So if you want to play or run a game of bad guys, like a group of bad guy bounty hunters or something, that will be possible. So I'm excited about that. And then in addition to those two things are just 20 more space monsters, I call them. So it's a D20 table, just like you find in Grit Galaxies or Grit Fantasy. And so you're going to have 20 monsters that are brand new, that are Grit specific. I am not taking anything from any other game or setting from that. They're going to be brand new, never seen before. And at the end of that is going to be a monster builder as well. And, with all new features and all that stuff. So you're going to have a lot of new stuff to work with. And so you can combine fantasy and galaxies with those and just have a huge amount of monsters to choose from. Okay. So pretty exciting stuff. Now, if we get into loot, this is another big one. I am questioning my sanity, actually, at this point, but I am going to develop 400 new loot items. So that's going to be 40-20 tables of gear, 40-20 tables of miscellaneous stuff, and 12 D20 remarkable items. So those will be on par with the artifacts from the fantasy book. Okay, so they're going to have 400 more items to put out in your games. So again, between fantasy and galaxies, you're going to have a plethora of choices for things. And part of the remarkable items, there's one table at least that will be arcane items too. So I'm going to kind of sprinkle a little bit of magic stuff into galaxies because I think that's fun. So again, that'll be kind of just another indicator that Grit Fantasy and Grit Galaxies are going to be kind of the pillars of what I base everything else on as I move forward with Grit RPG. And there are a number of settings that I want to put out, but I feel like these two things have to be finished first. Okay. The only other thing in the book will be a miscellaneous section at the very end, and that will really only have a character sheet. Okay. So yeah, it'll be colored differently, but it'll look basically identical. And what I'm going to put out with this book is, of course, when you buy the hardcover or softcover, it's going to come with the PDF. But I'm going to put out, just like I did with the fantasy, an 8.5 by 11 character sheet. Also, the smaller character sheet. And I think I'm going to put out a quick rules guide that you can, put out to your players just for reference for players who are new to the system. Okay. And that's something that I've got on my list to do for Grit Fantasy as well. But this will be just, the Grit Galaxies version. Probably won't be a lot of difference between the two other than color and maybe a few little points. But yeah, so you'll have those. And then moving into the last thing, kind of moving out of Grit Galaxies. Or actually, I do have to mention this too. I will be producing a digital token set for Grit Galaxies, which will take all the monsters and lineages from the book and put them into nice tokens, which will be a huge token set. And then I'll also put out a punch-out token set for people that want to build in-person tokens, in-person game tokens for Grit Galaxies. So, and those things will be put out probably a lot quicker than I did before because I don't have to colorize all the images. Because with Grit Fantasy, the whole book is grayscale. I actually went in and colorized every single one of those illustrations for those tokens. So this time around, I won't have to do that. I will just be able to make out tokens pretty quickly. So other projects. This is a few other things that you can expect me to be working on. One is I'm currently working on some monster cards for Grit Fantasy. I've been held up with kind of the layout and graphic design part of it. I struggle with that sometimes, so it has been taking me some time. But the idea is I want a deck of cards that are just poker sized, that will have a monster picture on one side and its stats on the other. And I will have a few, randomized tables that are identical to what's in the book, basically, that you can roll out monsters from. And basically, you can take these and put those on the table, show them to your players. They're going to be quick reference. Okay, so that'll be fun. Another thing is I'm looking at another printer, and I am really considering moving to another printer. I probably will stick with DriveThruRPG to some extent, but there's another printer called Lulu that I'm looking at because they have different options for the books, and they also have a lot faster turnaround for printing. But one of those things is I want to make a character book that's spiral bound. So it's going to have a ton of character sheets in it. It's going to have spaces for notes. It's going to have possibly a quick rules section, and then maybe like some dot graph paper built into it. So the idea is that it's just going to have a ton of character sheets that are blank, that you can have all your characters in one spot for a player. Okay, so that's cool. Another thing too, talking about Lulu and the spiral bound, is it would be great to put out spiral bound versions of Grit Fantasy and Grit Galaxies that would open easily and sit on the table for when you're running your games. So I'm excited about that too. Another thing is the Grit coloring book. I would love to take the illustrations from the books and make some coloring books out of them. I think that would be really fun. And then kind of moving away from, the RPG stuff, I would love to get into some illustration projects, and I'm thinking about an alphabet book, like a kid's book. So that is just a few things that I'm thinking about, just, to let you guys know. I can't guarantee any of that stuff is going to happen right away or at all, but that is on the list of things for me to do. So just to wrap things up here, I just really excited about finally being able to talk about this Grit Galaxies project. I'm having a lot of fun testing it out, and we'll be continuing to test it out for a while. And I don't expect this to come out until next year. I have some of the illustrations set up as far as the mock-ups are concerned, but I have not started much at all of final illustration work. I have been just mostly writing right now. And right now I've got about 71 or 72 pages done out of 138. So just to let you know where I'm at. And that's just, I'm trying to do a page a day, but it doesn't always happen. So anyway, that is that. I just want to put this all out there to get the ball rolling. I want to kind of update what's happening with Grit Galaxies as I move through it. Because I think that's an important thing to kind of, make people aware that this project is happening and that it will be coming out soon. So thank you so much for listening in on this. I really appreciate you following along, and I hope you're out there gaming and having fun, and I hope things are all good for you. And keep rolling those dice.